The Secretary General this morning addressed the General Assembly special session in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. He said that for the first time since 1945, the entire world is confronted by a common threat, regardless of nationality, ethnicity, or faith. Mr. Guterres noted that while COVID-19 does not discriminate, our efforts to prevent and contain it do, adding that it has hit the poorest and most vulnerable the hardest. While a vaccine may be available soon, the Secretary General stressed that we must not fool ourselves. A vaccine cannot undo the damage that will stretch across years, even decades to come. As this difficult year draws to a close, he said we must resolve to take the tough, ambitious decisions and actions that will lead to better days ahead. The Secretary General added that in global crisis, we must meet the expectations of those who serve with unity, solidarity, and coordinated multilateral global action. Just an update on the Security Council, which this morning held a meeting on security sector reform. A briefing on behalf of the United Nations Secretariat, Assistant Secretary General Bintou Keita said that for societies recovering from conflict and instability, security sector reform holds a great promise, adding that there is a broad recognition that this is a key element of UN support to national efforts to sustain peace and prevent the outbreak, escalation, continuation and recurrence of conflict across the entire peace continuum. But she reminded Council members that expectations need to be realistic. Security sector governance and reform is a complex and long-term endeavor, sometimes spanning a generation. Therefore, she concluded it is important that the UN support in this area remain firmly grounded in and informed by the security needs of the population, taking into account each unique context and historical experience. Note from Ethiopia and the region, our humanitarian colleagues are telling us that that a mission has been on the ground in Afar since yesterday to assess the most immediate needs of people displaced by the conflict in Tigray and guide our response. This follows agreement that we told you about yesterday between the UN in Ethiopia and the federal government to facilitate the access of aid organizations to areas under the control of the government. The conflict in Tigray continues to push people into Sudan in search of safety. More than 46,400 people, nearly half of them children, have now arrived in Sudan since the start of November. UNHCR and its partners are increasing the capacity of the Rakuba camp, which is already hosting more than 10,000 Ethiopian refugees. And turning to Yemen, the window to prevent famine in Yemen is narrowing as new figures reveal record highs of acute food insecurity in the country. That's according to new information today from the Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Food Program, and UNICEF. The agency's new integrated food security phase classification analysis for Yemen indicates that pockets of famine-like conditions, or phase 5 food insecurity, have already returned for the first time in 2 years. They warn that the number of people experiencing this degree of catastrophic food insecurity could nearly triple from 16,500 currently to 47,000 people between January and June of 2021. At the same time, today's analysis warns that the number of people facing phase 4 insecurity, that's the emergency phase, is poised to increase from 3.6 million to 5 million people. And our friends across the street at UNICEF today issued their largest ever emergency funding appeal. They're seeking $6.4 billion to reach 300 million people, including more than 190 million children, with essential support and services through the end of 2021. The appeal is a 35% increase over funds requested for last year. UNICEF said it reflects the expanding humanitarian needs globally amidst protracted crises from the pandemic. UNICEF also notes the number of climate-related disasters have tripled in the last 30 years, threatening food security, increasing water scarcity, forcing people from their homes, and increasing the risk of conflict and public health emergencies. An estimated 36 million children, more than ever before, are living in displacement due to conflict, violence, and disaster. Malnutrition among children is on the rise in countries around the world. And a couple of peacekeeping updates. We have an update on the forthcoming elections on the Central African Republic. The UN mission in that country is aware of the ruling of the Constitutional Court of the Central African Republic earlier today regarding the candidacies to the presidential elections scheduled, as you know, for the end of this year. The UN mission calls on all stakeholders to respect the decision of the court and to work together to advance the electoral process. The United Nations continues to provide multifaceted support to that process. And the UN mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo reports that the Deputy Special Representative for Operations and Protection, that's David Grizzly, visited the towns of Fataki and Bayu, or two villages rather, in Ituri's Jugu territory, and that's part of the mission's support to local communities and authorities. There he met with local women to discuss the impact of the ongoing conflict in the region and ways and means to restore peace in this part of Ituri. The UN mission continues to work closely with the armed forces of the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Jugu, including with aerial reconnaissance, day and night motorized and foot patrols, the evacuation of soldiers wounded in the fighting, and special military operations. The UN mission has also deployed military bases in Fataki and Bayu to prevent armed activities and to protect the civilian population. And I was asked for a reaction to the passing of the former President of France, and I can tell you that the Secretary General is saddened by the passing of President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. He expresses his sincere condolences and deep sympathy to Mr. Giscard d'Estaing's family and to the people of France. As part of his legacy, Mr. Giscard d'Estaing will be remembered for his commitment and contribution to European integration as well as to cooperation among leading industrialized nations. Today is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and in his message for the day, the Secretary General noted that when the crises such as COVID grips communities, persons with disabilities are among the most affected. He said that even under normal circumstances, the 1 billion people living with disabilities worldwide are less likely to enjoy access to education, healthcare, and livelihoods, or to participate or be included in the community. He stressed that as the world recovers from the pandemic, we must ensure that the aspiration and rights of persons with disabilities are included and accounted for an inclusive, accessible, and sustainable post-COVID world. Related to that, I wanted to flag that our team on the ground in Malawi, led by the resident coordinator Maria Jose Torres, called on everyone, including the government, civil society, and private sector, to do more to ensure the full and equal participation of people with disabilities and to achieve the SDGs. Ms. Torres said that more than 10% of Malawians who live with at least one type of disability continue to suffer disproportionate challenges to access to education, health care services, and dignified sources of income. The UN team are also strongly condemned the recent cases of killings and exhumations of remains of persons with albinism. It called for an end to such attacks and desecration of tombs, as well as continued harmful beliefs that generate discrimination, exclusion, violence against people living with albinism. The team also noted the multiple challenges faced by women and girls with disabilities, particularly the threat of sexual violence, which is aggravated during the pandemic. And this is our monthly update on the food price index from the FAO, which says that the global food commodity prices rose sharply in November to their highest level in nearly 6 years. The FAO food price index averaged 105 points during the month, up 3.9% from October and 6.5% from a value a year earlier. FAO also noted the impact of COVID-19, particularly in terms of income losses, as important drivers of the levels of global food insecurity. The pandemic is intensifying already fragile conditions caused by conflict, pests, weather shocks, including recent hurricanes in Central America and floods in Africa. According to the quarterly Crop Prospects and Food Situation Report, also published today by FAO, 45 countries continue to require external assistance for food. Of those countries, 34 are in Africa. And I wanted to flag that today was also the launch of the report of the High-Level Panel for Sustainable Ocean Economy. In a video message, the Secretary General said the report's findings, which are the results of 2 years of research from experts, must be put into action. It says that with better policies and technology, we can produce as much as 6 times more food from the ocean, generate 40 times more renewable energy, lift millions of people out of poverty, and contribute to 1/5 of greenhouse gas reductions. The Secretary General also commended the 14 heads of states and ocean panel who have agreed that by 2025, their countries will be sustainably managed, all of the ocean areas under their national jurisdictions. And he also acknowledged the leadership of those countries who have signed up to the Global Oceans Alliance. Halas, Betul, and then James.
The COVID summit, which is happening today, has the UN or the Secretary General reached out to the 2 drug companies, Pfizer and Moderna, which have promising vaccines, to join the COVAX initiative. And 3 former U.S. presidents announced that they would get vaccinated publicly to show that it's safe. Will the Secretary General get a vaccine, and is he going to do it publicly? And also, what kind of outcome does the SG want to see from today's COVID summit? Thanks.
Okay. Welcome back. I'll try to take those questions backwards. I think, the meeting that is being held today is a very important meeting, bringing voices from around the globe virtually to talk about the pandemic, which, as we've been saying, is impacting everything that we do and is impacting everywhere. What the Secretary General would like to see, and I'm not talking specifically about the outcome of this meeting, but in general, in terms of progress on COVID, is greater financial support from the G20 to the COVAX facilities, extension of the debts, which he's spoken about, and assurances from everywhere that the vaccines will be treated as a global public good. I have not had a chance to talk to the Secretary General about the vaccine, but I have no doubt that once it is available, he will take it, and we'd love to get a photo of it. But I need to have a conversation with him about that. And your first question, now I forgot. Pfizer. I think that's a question best asked of the World Health Organization at this point. Mr. Bays.
Has made what was quite a strong speech on COVID-19, saying that the funding is totally insufficient, and suggesting he has some frustration about this. But the problem is this meeting today has no outcome at all. The countries are not going to decide anything. His criticism seems to be in many parts centred on the G20. They have had their meeting. Mm-hmm. He didn't manage to change their view. It's been and gone. They don't have another meeting until next year. So I assume there's really no chance that his call is going to be heeded.
Well, listen, I think you're right to discern a sense of frustration from the Secretary General. And I think if you look at the progression of what he's been saying on COVID, the sense of frustration is growing and the language is sharper and I think much more direct. I don't think we need to wait for another gathering of the G20 for governments to make decisions. A lot of the decisions, especially having to do with funding, are in a way decisions that governments take on their own. They're often announced in a group meeting. So we have not lost hope that his call will be heeded, and he will continue to make that point, both publicly and privately.
One more question on a different subject. Bangladesh and the transfer of Rohingya. You told us about it yesterday. Mm-hmm. I wondered if you had any update. I believe on Thursday, with the figures I've seen, at least 80 buses carrying 2,500 people have left the Cox's Bazar camp. What information has the UN been able to gather? Have all of these people been as they're supposed to be volunteers?
Listen, unfortunately, I was not able to get an update from that. We've seen the reports, but we'll try to get something later this afternoon, or if not, tomorrow.
Would it be at all possible to get a UN official who is there to brief us at some point?
It's a good idea. Ms. Lederer.
much, Steph. On Yemen, in light of this rising famine threat, what is Martin Griffiths doing at the moment? And is the UN trying to spur new resources for the humanitarian?
The short answer is yes, and whether it's Mr. Griffiths or other humanitarian agencies, or especially David Beasley, who's leading on food, I think everyone is knocking on all doors that they can, really pleading for more resources. I mean, Yemen is a place where more than 80% of the people need humanitarian assistance and protection. Our top priority right now is to prevent famine. There are different ways to go about it. One, obviously, the most urgent way is to get resources and to get food and support to those people who need it. But in a very much in a parallel track, it is the need to find a political solution to this man-made humanitarian disaster. And that's what Mr. Griffiths, for his part, is very much focusing on. Yeah, Ray. And then we'll go to the screen.
Thank you, Steph. Today, the U.S. Treasury Department has announced new sanction against a group in Iran. It's called Shahid Misami Group. It's a group that intends to do some nuclear researches, and against a guy whose name is Mahran Babri. You have any comment on that?
No, I had not heard, but I will find out. Okay, Abdel Hamid, I see you waving.
Thank you, Stéphane. I have two questions. One on Ethiopia. Was the UN able to get the humanitarian aid into Meghalli, the capital of Tigray? No. And the second question on Libya. A recent report by the US confirmed that United Arab Emirates had financed the intervention of the Wagner mercenaries into Libya. Do you confirm this report? Do you have independent sources that prove or that confirm this?
No, from the Secretary's point of view, it's not. We don't have the intelligence gathering capabilities that nation states do. What is clear, and especially if you look at the report by the sanctions experts, is that the list of external actors who are fueling the conflict is long. And the Secretary General, his acting special representatives, have long called for all those who are doing exactly that to stop and to recognize and honor the Security Council sanctions on Libya. What Libya needs is peace, is a political accord, and that's what Stephanie Williams is focusing on. You had a second question. Oh, on Ethiopia. No, the short answer on Mekele is no. We are still working on the modalities, the operational modalities with the federal government to get access. We are poised. We are ready to go. But there's still some details that need to be worked out. But we're very, I know the Secretary General is very pleased by the fact that an agreement was reached with the federal government on that. Okay, let me just see if there's another screen before Maria Krinova.
Hi, Steph. Thank you. I just saw the news that there have been a phone conversation between Russian foreign minister and the SG. Will we get any readout of this?
Yeah, I can confirm the conversation took place. I have not had a chance to get a readout just yet. Okay, I'll go to Majid, and then we'll go back to the second round.
Believe it or not, I have a question on marijuana. Yesterday, the Commission, the UN Commission...
I can believe it, Majid.
Yesterday, the UN Commission for Narcotic Drugs voted to remove cannabis for medical purposes from a category of the world's most dangerous drugs. Does this mean a change of the United Nations stance against marijuana? Is UN encouraging countries to not categorize marijuana as dangerous as heroin and other drugs?
Well, I think this is a decision by the Narcotics Control Board, which is an independent body. I mean, if you look at what the Secretary General has said in the past, he has and in his actions, in fact, when he was Prime Minister of Portugal, is moving on the decriminalization of drugs and treating it as a social issue rather than a criminal issue.
Just on that, so you mentioned drugs. So he encouraged decriminalization of every kind of drugs.
No,
not just
I think we are looking at what we are focusing on is the decriminalization of users and addicts.
Stéphane, this is Joe Klein. Can you hear me?
Yes, Joe, I can hear you and I can see you.
Oh, you can see me. Thank you. But I couldn't. The chat line's not working, so that's why I had to do it. Yesterday, the Iran legislature passed a law that if certain conditions were not met by next March, they would kick out the international inspectors. They also are requiring them ramping up to 20% enrichment of uranium. I wonder if the Secretary General has any comment on provocative.
I mean, I think you were asking me to comment on what the Iranian parliament had decided. The news that I saw is that the law had not been validated by the executive. And we've always said that we believe that Iran should live up to its commitments under the JCPOA and with the IAEA. James?
Well, my understanding is, my understanding is that there's a body above the presidency that can effectively ratify the legislation.
Well, your understanding of Iranian constitutional law is greater than mine, so I'm not going to argue with you about it. But what I can tell you is that our position is that Iran should live up to the commitments under the JCPOA, as well as cooperate with the IAEA. Mr. Bays, then Bitul.
So I have a number of other questions. Let's start with two things that actually haven't happened yet. The Egyptian Initiative for Personal Rights, you'll remember that 3 of their staff have been detained. The Egyptian media reporting that they may be released in the coming hours. Is the Secretary General hopeful about that?
We have called for their release. I think these are delicate moments. I would not want to say anything that may impact the process in a negative way.
Okay. The senior advisor to President Trump, Jared Kushner, has been in Qatar and Saudi Arabia. There are reports that Saudi Arabia may be close to reopening its airspace. What is the Secretary General's view on the current situation and on this, on his longer-term view on the blockade?
Well, I mean, the Secretary General has always called for the Gulf countries to use diplomatic word to patch up their differences. And which would only lead to greater stability in the region. He had been very supportive of the late Emir of Kuwait's efforts He had been very supportive of the late Emir of Kuwait's efforts towards that end, and anything that would bring greater unity and stability to the region, we would welcome.
And Hong Kong. Police in Hong Kong have detained Jimmy Lai and 2 of his executives. They were denied bail. What is your reaction to another pro-democracy media figure in Hong Kong, very well-known person being detained for no other reason than campaigning for democracy and freedom?
Well, always believed that people have a right to express themselves freely, free of harassment and intimidation, and people should not be jailed for what they think, for their conscience, and that it's important that these people have insurance access to a right to a fair trial and due process in line with international obligations.
Steph, a question on Libya. We know that the Secretary General has sent a letter to the Security Council about his intention to appoint Mr. Mladenow as his UN Libya envoy. Is he frustrated that his pick has not been confirmed yet?
I sense the Secretary General gets frustrated. There's a growing level of frustration in a number of things. Would he have hoped to have a special envoy named a long time ago for Libya? Yes, is the short answer. But there is a reality that we have to deal with, and he is dealing with that reality, and he does not control all the levers within this process. Do you have another questions, James? Or? No, I was going to go get lunch otherwise, but I'm happy to stay.
So staying with Libya then, my understanding is that report that the SG has to write is coming out at the end of the year, on the 29th, and will include his options for monitoring the ceasefire. I'm also told by diplomats that the Secretariat currently favours a very low footprint operation in Libya, and that some other members of the Security Council would like a much more robust international presence on the ground in Libya. Can you explain the Secretary General's thinking?
I think we'll have to wait for the report to come out, which is coming out in December, later in December. There is often a difference of views between the Secretariat and the member states, and I'm sure discussions will continue, and we will, of course, in the end, abide by resolutions put out by the Security Council.
My final question, meltdown on the Security Council virtual operation again today on the screens. Translation all failed, sound failed, echoes everywhere. I mean, the system clearly doesn't work properly. It's not good enough for a body as important as the Security Council. What's being done to fix it?
Let me look into that before I eat. All right, Mr. Varma, they're all yours. Maybe I'll look into it after.